Thank you very much for these kind words, and thank you for inviting me. So obviously, I'm not here today, but I am here in virtual form, and I'm going to present to you today the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning in corporate decision making and what that really means. This is something that we endorse, something we embrace. But before that, I just want to tell you a story. So a couple of months ago, I had made an appointment with a friend of mine at Caviar and Bull, and I really was getting late. But first of all, how did I do this appointment? Actually, I made this appointment with an application called AI, which actually arranges your agenda, everything for you. So there's an AI machine learning algorithm behind it that basically organizes your life, make your appointments, and checking everything around that. So I was late, and Siri continuously reminded me that I was late. And again, we have this algorithm that is in our smartphone and around that gives us an idea that something is about to happen. Then, rushing there, Waze, as you know, is the application we use to navigate around Budapest or anywhere, actually tried to guide me through Budapest in the most sensible way to try to get me to my appointment in time. And again there's a massive amount of information that is being processed in this application in the back end and trying to find the best way for you. Again, intelligent algorithm behind trying to get me to where I have to be. Then I was at a crossing and suddenly I saw a car moving beside me and I just stopped my car and my car brakes. Why did it do that? Well, there was a green light for the ones beside me, but not really for me, and actually saved me from crashing pretty heavily up in the car in front of me. Again, the intelligence system of the car is keeping and monitoring my surroundings and basically interfering if I'm trying to do something silly here. Then, as I was late, the XAI notified my friend that actually I was late, and the reason why I was late was due to the traffic. So it sensed I was on the way, but due to traffic, I was late. Again, AI trying to arrange and trying to help and augment your day. Finally, when I was at the restaurant, actually, I used the Vivino application to recommend wines that I knew my friend and I likely had tried in the past, and actually also what would actually fit with the dinner we had. So again, to show you that we use AI pretty much everywhere in our daily life. So I don't know if we trust it, but to some extent we do trust it because we do use it. The question then is, do we actually trust this also in our business? And I think this is really the question today. So what about us? What about, do we trust this? So let's first take a look at this. So there is a problem with trust at the moment. There's a very clear problem there, and if you look at it, people around the world are actually increasingly becoming dependent on digital technologies, but they are also at some point getting more distrustful. The issues around Facebook, the election in the US, Donald Trump, the Russian interference, the Brexit, all are elements of where we feel we're being manipulated. And the reason why we've been manipulated is all the data that is on us in the digital domain being used by companies and maybe sometimes not so nice actors to try to influence our opinion. So there is a trust issue here. Second of all, there's a bias issue. We all know about the biases in these intelligent algorithms, and sometimes the reason for this bias is not because of the algorithm itself, but because of the data that is fed. If I tell you my name is Kim, you do not think about a man, you think about a woman. If I talk about a doctor without mentioning the gender, you would most likely have a picture of a man. So again, bias is something that is very prevalent in everything. It's prevalent as a human being. It's part of our cognition. But it's also something that actually is a big issue, or can be a big issue for artificial intelligence, and particularly some of the machine learning systems we have around. So something we should keep in mind. So where are we at the moment? So I want to take you through a survey that I've done some months ago, where I looked at how does decision makers look at data-driven decisions, in particular the augmentation by AI or machine learning algorithms in their decision-making process. And I don't want to make this, I don't want to spend a lot of time here. I use SurveyMonkey. I've done about 4 surveys, paid responses on this, and in general, this is very much focused on the American population, but work I've done also in Europe indicates that these results are fairly similar across different countries, Western countries at the very least. A lot of more of that I've actually written down in several blogs that you will find on AIstrategyblog.com, and you can go in and look at some of the details for that as well. Whenever you go through this, always keep in mind that all of you might know what AI is, what AI stands for. There's actually about 7 to 14%, depending a little bit about which kind of category you are sampling in the population, that has never heard about AI. Or when you ask about AI, this is the first time they actually see that. And that's always a good thing to remember, that not all of us are at the same level when it comes to technology. So one of the things I've been very interested in is how do we see ourselves as decision makers, and particularly when we compare it to our peers, and that's actually one of the questions I had. And if you look at that, you actually see here for men, 67% actually believe that they are above average compared to their peers. And if you take this and actually look at how does women feel about this, you see a much more balance. About 51% is believing that they are above average compared to their peers. Now, interesting here is, of course, that statistically this cannot be true. Like if you look at nobody is pretty much below the average, right? So everybody is either average or above. Statistically, that's not really possible. And this is something that's always very good to keep in mind. And when we look at decision makers, that they do have this idea that they are substantially better at making decisions compared to their peers. So worthwhile thinking about. So gut feel, how many of us are using our gut feel to make decisions? So not really a data-driven decision, but just how do we feel about a certain decision, a certain action that needs to be taken. And there you actually see that if you look at owners, executives, or C-level, that they actually characterize their gut feel as being substantially better than their peers. And if you then look at the other, the starting point, the entry level in a corporate, you actually find that about 61% believes that their gut feel is better than peers. So overall, people in general believe that their gut feel, that feel about a certain decision is better than the peers. But as you get up in the hierarchy, as you get older, often you start trusting your gut more and more. Now, moving a little bit ahead. So we now have an idea that if me as a decision maker, I'm certainly of the impression that I'm better than my peers, by my colleagues. I also believe that my feel for a certain decision is certainly much better, and if I am an executive, which I am, I must surely be much better than anybody else around me. But what about the data that we're actually using? So if you look at data availability for data-driven decisions, you will actually find that in general, we do have the data. Data is available. Actually, in this case here, how often is data available for corporate decisions? We see that frequently, almost too frequently, is about almost 60%. And that's good news. Of course, there is also the other side of it is that for 40% of the corporate decisions, data is actually often missing or not being used that frequently. Again, coming back to decision makers often thinking and believing that their gut feel or their way of making decisions are better than peers. Why would I need data? Now, other questions you ask is, what is the quality of that? Now, in this case here, actually, you suggested if data is available, how would you characterize the quality of the data? In that case, we see a little bit worse outlook here. Actually, roughly about 40% of the data, 37% of the data is either very high or high. And actually, we conclude here that less than 40%, if you look at the other end of the distribution, meets high standards for high quality data-driven decisions. And this is actually a problem, obviously, because if we are using poor data or low quality data or biased data to make our data-driven decision, that data-driven decision is going to be biased as well and going to be possibly wrong, or at least have substantially higher risk for it. So it's an important thing to keep in mind when we look at data and we talk about data-driven decisions. When data is available, are we actually using it? Well, lo and behold, actually data is always considered or frequently considered is in the above 70%, which is good because you would expect that if this is available, it would be used. I think also here is that the other side of the coin really is that about 30% of decisions, available data is often not being used. And again, if you look at people, in particular decision makers, that believe they are very good at making decisions and believe their gut feel is right, which might not indicate that you're using much of the data. then maybe that part of the coin there is something to consider. So with that in mind, how do we actually feel about AI? How do we feel about AI helping us, augmenting, or even taking over decision making? Now, interesting here is to take a look at men and take a look at women, and is there any differences from a gender perspective? So if you take a look here, you actually see that in terms of how we feel, women are a bit more balanced in their view on AI and how they feel about AI. 38% here are feeling positive about AI, if you were a woman. If you go to the man's side, you see men in general are more optimistic, feeling better about technology. It's about 57% that are actually positive about AI. And again, this is something you see through many surveys, that men in general tend to be a lot more embracing new technology and feeling more positive about the new technologies. If you now change the scope a little bit and saying, how does it actually look with women and men with children below 18 years of age? You see that women stays the same. They still keep a sort of balanced view from a positive, neutral perspective. But men here really goes bang. So having children, having young children for men makes it even more positive in how they actually embrace AI. So another question we should ask ourselves, do you actually believe that humans are more objective than AIs? And that's an interesting question, because if we do believe that we are more objective than AIs, that also means the decision making we do, in principle, should be more objective. Now, I can tell you about the hundreds of cognitive biases humans have, and in principle, where AI should not. So let's just have a look at here. And very clearly, yes, we do believe that humans are more objective than AIs, which actually is not really objectively true. But as a human being, this is how we feel. And this also tells us a little bit about our opinion and how we view augmented decision making, where we have an AI or an intelligent algorithm in play. So how important is human opinion compared to data-driven insights in your decision making? And if you look at that, it's 51% believes that this is very important, and less about, if you go down to this, it becomes less and less relevant. So again, indicating that yes, we can consider data-driven decisions, but the human part of it is very important. Would you trust a decision? So here actually is, would you trust a critical decision, corporate decision made by a fellow human expert or superior? Here actually you see 53% would frequently or always trust such an opinion. Now if you change the wording and start saying, would you actually trust a critical corporate decision made by an AI, what you actually see here, only 12% would actually trust such a decision. And this is just a decision that has been augmented or possibly just supported a particular human way of looking at it. So there's a very big difference there between how we view and how we embrace a human-based decision and an AI, quite substantially. So why is that? So we actually find, and that's again confirmed in many other studies, that AI aversion or allergy is really something that is real. It's something that really is a corporate ailment. People are not that willing to endorse a decision or an augmented decision made by an intelligent algorithm or made by math in general. Going on to that, let's try to change the game a little bit and actually put a qualifier onto here. So would you trust a corporate decision made by a fellow human whose success rate is better than 70%? It's pretty good. Now again, here actually 53% would frequently or always trust such a decision, not different from the previous one where there was no qualifier of how good would decision maker actually be. If you put it over to the AI side, you do see an improvement in the perception of such decisions, but you still are about 17% that would actually trust an AI success rate better than 70%. Now, I should say that in general, and that's what literature also shows, is that people, human beings, are substantially worse at making decisions than typically augmented by intelligent algorithms. So it's worthwhile saying how we view it and how the objective world is very different. So we actually, what we see here is we hold AIs to much stricter standards than our fellow humans. And just stop up and think a little bit about this. How forgiving are we by an accident made by human drivers? And how do we view actually self-driving cars? I think that's a very important point to think about here. Now, almost at the end, could your job or that of your friends be replaced by an AI? interesting here is if I ask you guys, do you think that your job could be replaced by an AI? I think in general, most of you would say no, not possible. And this is also what we see in the survey. Now turn it around and ask yourself, thinking of your friends, do you believe that their jobs could be replaced by an AI? And here you see a complete change. So when we think about our friends, we think about their jobs, we actually are much more willing to contemplate that they could lose their job to intelligent automation or AIs. Again, showing that if you think about a problem from somebody else's perspective, it's easier for us to actually view and break that down. So it's much easier to imagine our friends losing their jobs to an AI or an automation than ourselves. That's one important message. Yeah. So what? Well, humans are increasingly dependent on technologies in their decision making. It's coming more and more, it's everywhere. But there's the other side of it is that we also become increasingly distrustful of technologies, digital technologies, and at the same time, we are not willing to accept the benefits and the risks they sometimes bring. We hold AI to much higher standards than our fellow human beings. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for listening to this, and again, apologies that I couldn't be here in person. Thank you.